Something is clearly brewing behind the scenes, and if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, you're going to want to pay very close attention to this. Because the way this front office is positioned right now, heading into the 2026 NFL Draft, could completely reshape the future of this franchise. And not in a quiet, conservative way. We're talking about a potentially aggressive, calculated move up the board that could send shockwaves across round one. Let's start with the raw facts, because they matter. The Vikings are sitting on 9 total picks in the 2026 draft, with 4 selections inside the top 100. That alone gives them flexibility. But here's where it gets interesting. They also hold multiple late-round assets, 2 fifth-rounders and 3 seventh-round picks, which suddenly become ammunition. Not just depth pieces, but trade chips. Now, across the league, there's a growing expectation that this draft will be one of the most trade-heavy in recent memory. League sources are pointing to a very specific trend. Teams are expected to be aggressive early, especially in the first half of round one. Defensive talent, edge rushers, corners, linebackers, is deep, while wide receiver leads the offensive class. That combination creates urgency, and urgency creates movement. So where do the Vikings fit into this? Right in the middle of the storm. I'll tell you in a moment, but first make sure to click the like button, and if you've been a fan for more than 25 years, write in the comments, SKOL Vikings. Let's go. Because when you combine draft capital with positional needs and a defense still searching for true elite playmakers, the idea of trading up doesn't just make sense. It almost feels inevitable. And there's one name that keeps coming up. One prospect that could change everything if he starts to slide. Caleb Downs. This is where things get fascinating. Downs, the safety out of Ohio State, is being viewed by some as the best overall player in this draft class. Not best at his position. Best, period. And yet, there's a real possibility he could fall outside the top 10. Think about that for a second. A blue-chip, culture-setting, tone-setting defensive weapon, potentially slipping. If that happens, the Vikings cannot sit still. We're talking about a player described as incredibly versatile, a hard hitter, a leader whose coaches and teammates rave about him. The kind of presence this defense has been missing. The comparison floating around? A more explosive version of Kyle Hamilton coming out of Notre Dame. That's not casual praise. That's elite projection. And here's the strategy being floated. If Downs is still on the board around pick 10 or 11, the Vikings could package pick 18 along with pick 82 to move up. According to draft value charts, that's nearly an even exchange. Clean, efficient, aggressive, but not reckless. And suddenly, you're not just adding a player, you're adding an identity. But that's just one layer of this story. Because while Downs represents the ideal scenario, there are other names creating buzz, and not all of them come without risk. Jeremiah Love, for example, has skyrocketed up boards to the point where landing him would likely require a massive leap into the top 5. That kind of move? Highly unlikely. The cost would be enormous, and the path just doesn't seem realistic right now. Then there's the cornerback conversation, Mansour Delane and others, where opinions inside the fan base could be split. The current cornerback room isn't a weakness, but it's not untouchable either. So the question becomes, do you spend capital to upgrade, or trust what you have? And just when you think the conversation couldn't get more complex, another scenario enters the picture, a bold one. What if the Vikings attached a player, someone like Jordan Addison, in a trade package to jump even higher on the board? Not future picks, but a current offensive weapon. That's the kind of move that signals a shift in philosophy. A willingness to sacrifice balance for elite defensive upside. It's risky. It's controversial. but it's absolutely on the table. And all of this is happening before we even get into round 2 targets, where names like Jacob Rodriguez are already generating serious intrigue as potential steals if the Vikings decide to move again. So here's where I leave you. For now, if the Vikings truly have the assets, if the board starts to fall in their favor, and if a player like Caleb Downs is within reach, do you want them to be aggressive and go get him? Or do you stay patient and trust the board to come to you? I want to hear from you. Would you trade up in this draft or stay put and build with volume? Drop your take right now. And this is exactly where things start to get even more strategic and, honestly, even more dangerous for the rest of the league, because if the Minnesota Vikings don't make their big move in round 1, it doesn't mean they're done being aggressive. In fact, round 2 might be where this front office quietly wins the draft, because there's one name that keeps coming up internally, one player that checks every single box, and if he somehow slips out of the first round, it could trigger immediate action. Jacob Rodriguez. Let's be very clear about this. Rodriguez isn't just a good prospect. He dominated college football last season, tested extremely well athletically, and, this is key, he comes into the league with virtually no red flags. That combination is rare. Production, athleticism, and clean evaluation. That's how you find impact starters, or even future stars. Now here's the twist. Current projections suggest he's more likely to be available in round 2 than round 1. And if that happens, the Vikings shouldn't hesitate. The expectation is simple. Pick up the phone, call teams in the early second round, and go get him. No waiting. No hoping he falls. Because if you hit on a player like Rodriguez, you're not just adding depth, you're upgrading the core of your defense. And that theme continues when you look at the rest of the potential round 2 targets. Because this draft, for Minnesota, is clearly leaning toward one side of the ball. Defense. Let's talk about Caleb Banks for a second, because he might be the most polarizing player linked to the Vikings right now. On one hand, the physical tools are undeniable. 6'6", 327 pounds, elite movement for his size, and flashes on tape that scream dominance. There are moments where he looks like he could become the next Chris Jones, but then you turn on the full tape, and the inconsistency shows up. Effort questions. Injury concerns dating back to his time at Florida. It's the classic high-risk, high-reward evaluation. And this is where front offices earn their reputation. Do you trust the traits, or do you trust the tape? If the Vikings believe they can unlock him, he becomes a massive addition. If not, it's a gamble that could backfire. Now shift your attention to the secondary again, because there's another name that fits exactly what Brian Flores looks for in a defensive weapon: A.J. Halsey. This is a player who has done nothing but improve every single year of his college career. From New Mexico to Houston to LSU, the level of competition increased, and his production stayed consistent. That matters. It tells you he adapts. It tells you he grows. And more importantly, it tells you he's not close to his ceiling yet. Versatility, progression, and proven performance at multiple levels. That's a combination that fits perfectly into a complex defensive scheme. If the Vikings move up for someone like Halsey, it's not just about talent, it's about fit. And then there's a name that might not get the same national attention, but Vikings fans should absolutely know it. Lee Hunter. Hunter didn't light up the combine. He's not the flashiest athlete in this class. But when you turn on the tape, it's a completely different story. He's physical. He's instinctive. He does the dirty work. The kind of player who doesn't always show up on highlight reels, but shows up on winning defenses. The comparison that's been made? Akiem Hicks. Not just in play style, but in mentality. tough, relentless, disruptive in ways that don't always show up in the box score. And if you've watched what players like that have done against Minnesota over the years, you understand exactly why adding someone like Hunter could matter. So when you zoom out and look at the full picture, something becomes very clear. This isn't just about one trade. This is about a philosophy shift. The Vikings have the capital. They have the flexibility. And based on everything we're seeing, they also have the intent to be aggressive. Whether that's in round 1 for a potential superstar like Caleb Downs, or in round 2 targeting high-upside, high-impact defenders who could immediately contribute. But with aggression comes risk. Because every move up the board costs you something. Picks, players, future flexibility, and if you miss, you feel it for years. That's the reality of this moment. So now it comes down to identity. Do the Vikings stay patient, trust their 9 picks, and build depth across the roster? Or do they take a swing? Go get elite talent and try to accelerate this team into true contention. Because make no mistake, what happens in this draft could define the next era of Vikings football. Now I want to hear from you. If you're in that draft room, if you're the one making the call, are you going all in and trading up for a difference maker, or are you playing it smart and letting the board fall your way? Drop your take below, smash that like button if you're riding with the Vikings, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what could be one of the most important drafts in franchise history. SKOL Vikings.